In less than 2 years, I've gotten 10 arrest warrants. Right? And this is my 36th year as a journalist. I have maintained the same standards and ethics that I have from the 1986 until today. Not coincidentally, the end of the Marcos years and now the beginning of the Marcos years. And that's kind of the arc of my career, right? You take a look, I think the beginning of my career, I was focused on how these kind of one-man authoritarian rulers in Southeast Asia were being shifted out by democracy. Right. So the pendulum was swinging. And then now, we're back to one man, kind of authoritarian, illiberal types of leaders. On June 15th, 2020, it was the first time, really, they opened the courts after the COVID lockdown. Of course, we were among the first cases, so nobody knew what was going to happen. But I was, along with a former colleague, convicted of cyber libel. It was for a story I didn't write, editor supervised, that was published 8 years earlier, published at a time when the law we supposedly violated didn't even exist. That's cyber libel.
That's no small matter.
Kafkaesque. On the tax evasion charges, the government essentially said that we're a stock brokerage agency. So we were reclassified. And then because we're a stock brokerage agency, we should pay these taxes for selling stocks, which is not what we do, right? So this is very fundamental, and I don't know why these cases are in court. What I know for sure is that we're not going to voluntarily give up our rights. There is supposedly rule of law. And so we will hold the line. We will challenge everything legally. I think it is incumbent now on every Filipino, and I would actually extend that to every citizen of any democracy around the world. Don't bury your head in the sand. This is an existential moment, and we either fight for our democracy or we lose our rights.
We're at the end of the Duterte presidency. How did it turn out? How is his legacy different maybe than you expected?
In terms of how President Duterte has done, we've done a whole series assessing. You can see them on Rappler. It's some of the worst governance that we've had. It's a very strongman rule. Within 6 months of him taking office, we essentially watched our institutions crumble. So this is democracy crumbling from within. A Filipino president appoints about 6,000 people. And those tendrils last. You worry here about how many were appointed by Trump, and you already see the impact of one decision of that, right?
Right.
Well, this is how it crumbles from within. Similar trends in the United States, that liberal democracy, this trickle-down effect didn't trickle down. And so there's great unsatisfaction, which then can be fueled by a populist leader, right? And what it does is it creates an us against them. Very, very dangerous. In terms of President Duterte, our us against them were the drug dealers and everyone else. Drugs, before the candidacy of President Duterte, was a number 8 concern. And in his candidacy for president, it became number 1 with the help of Facebook.
Yeah, same thing with
right?
immigrants in the U.S.
Exactly. So this became our us against them. From the time Duterte took office until the end of 2016, if you go by the count that the Philippine police themselves had, you would have it to 7,000 people killed in that time period. That's only the first few months. But then what we saw happening is that the police themselves, when the government began to realize that the high numbers they were reporting was getting them censured because, this is murder, right? Extrajudicial killings. So what they did in plain view was to roll back the numbers. So it became 7,000 to 2,000. And what they said is, well, these 2,000, these are the ones that are really police. They fought back. That was, and the irony, of course, is that President Duterte already told them before he began the drug war that it's, if they fight back, shoot them.
Yeah.
And that was the narrative every single time. So anyway, what happened to those other 5,000 people? They were vigilante killings. So again, you atomize to meaninglessness. But of course, part of the reason we came under fire was because we refused to change the numbers that the police themselves reported. In those first few months, we only had one reporter and a production team out on the streets every night. they would come back with an average of 8 dead bodies a night, right? And this is like, it's like Gotham City, but we didn't have a Batman. It's stranger than fiction. Bodies dumped on the sidewalks, mask tape, a cardboard sign saying, "Don't imitate me," right? Like, truly, unbelievable. But the numbers kept rising. And when you're quibbling with numbers, you don't realize the impact. And so we began something we called the impunity series very early on. And this is turning those numbers into lives, into families. I think for me, a tipping point was when a 5-year-old girl, the target was like the grandfather, but a 5-year-old girl gets killed and it's okay, right? This is the kind, that was when I think I began to see, oh my God, there's something different happening here. And, at a certain point, the police themselves reported that during this time period, there was an average of 33 people killed every day. 33 every day. And until today, we still have no idea how many people were actually killed. The value of a life really demolished, right? So this is what we tried to do with the impunity series. We assigned one reporter. She could spend as much time as she needed. We wanted to make our people who were dying come alive.
You've long warned that the erosion of democracy in countries with weaker institutions bodes ill for democratic countries with stronger institutions. What parallels do you see between Trump and Duterte and U.S. and Philippine politics?
Lots. I mean, Duterte was Trump before Trump was Trump. I mean, if you think about it, the style of leadership, us against them, sexism and misogyny that, has given everyone in their societies the permission to be their worst selves in many ways. But look, let me put it this way: it's part of an entire system, right? Like, part of the reason both men were elected was the real world kind of unhappiness. And in the United States, it is also, like in the Philippines, the presidents we elect in the Philippines are always a reaction to the presidents before, right? So in many ways, a President Obama, who is a breakthrough, also triggers a reaction. It's Newton's third law of physics. And then you add this very incendiary spark, social media, which actually changes the incentive. It rewards anger, hate, lies, right? That's what it rewards. So in many ways, you don't have to explain policy. You don't have to be a good leader. You don't have to heal, which is what we expected of our leaders in the past. Sacha Baron Cohen said this a long time ago. It's not freedom of speech, it is freedom of reach. The algorithms spread the lies, and if it's laced with anger and hate, they spread it faster and further than the facts. These 3 sentences I've said numerous times over 6 years. Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without trust, there's no shared space. And that's part of the reason that you have, we've splintered all of our realities. I always say it's like social media, Facebook, which is the world's largest distributor of news globally, right? It's like the Matrix meets the Truman Show. Democracies rely on elections. But if we've been insidiously manipulated before the elections, where's the freedom of will that allows us to select, to actually go to the polls, knowing that our emotions haven't been manipulated? You don't have that certainty.
Right.
And that's, I think, a lesson you can look at from the Philippines. Because our May 9th elections this year, which brought Marcos Jr. back to power, which brought the Marcoses back, shows you, I think, is emblematic of the problem. We watched from 2014, which is when we saw the first disinformation networks come out, changing history. Literally, our history was changed in front of our eyes, and Marcos, the pariah, became a hero, right? There were people in our poorer neighborhoods who literally believed that if they voted Marcos, they would get gold. They believed that. And so this is the problem that you have with all the elections around the world, with your own midterms coming up. How do you How do we protect democracy when the manipulation, that insidious manipulation already programs our emotions to vote for an illiberal leader? The danger now is in our politics is that the very platforms that should be connecting us are literally dividing us. That's by design. How do these platforms grow? All the social media platforms use friends of friends. It's an algorithm to get you to grow your network, right? But in 2016, with President Duterte's us against them, if you're pro-Duterte, you moved further right. If you're anti-Duterte, you moved further left. That's 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. And here's this chasm. It's built into the design of the platform, right? They only give you what you want. The goal is to capture your attention,
right.
This attention economy, to keep you scrolling.
And they're, of course, very good at it.
But the problem is that this is a life of meaninglessness. And I worry about our kids today. The attention economy ultimately is by design fueling us with anger and hate. And when that happens, it turns into moral outrage. That's how it pops out, right? And moral outrage is a hop, skip, and a jump from mob violence, mob rule. Mob rule, right? These were things that we avoided because you lose individual responsibility and accountability in it. This is the world we live in today, and this emergent human behavior, I'm so worried.